I applied for the night shift security position at Crescent Ridge Mall, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. I mean, who wouldn't? A cushy gig watching over a quiet mall for 8 hours, just strolling around, drinking coffee, and checking the cameras. At 25, with a patchy job history, I didn't have the luxury of turning down easy money. The interview was brief, almost dismissive. The manager, Mr. Graves, was wiry, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that felt too intense for someone running a mall. He slid a thin booklet across the desk, its cover reading Night Shift Guidelines. These are the rules, he said, his voice as dry as parchment. Read them. Memorize them. And for your own good, don't break them. I smirked, thinking it was some elaborate hazing ritual. But the look in his eyes was deadly serious. Rules? I asked. You'll see, he muttered, almost to himself. The first thing I noticed that night was the silence. It was suffocating, so quiet you could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights echoing in the cavernous space. I set up in the security office, surrounded by a wall of screens. The mall, lifeless and dimly lit, stretched out before me like a tomb. The booklet sat on the desk. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. The first rule was simple enough, lock all entrances by 11 p.m. Double check. Triple check. I had already done that, so I felt reassured. But then came rule number 3, if you see a child holding a balloon, retreat to the office immediately. Do not approach, no matter what. I laughed out loud, shaking my head. This had to be a joke. But as the hours ticked by, the silence and the flickering monitors began to gnaw at me. At exactly 1:03 a.m., the intercom sputtered to life. The sound was distorted, a low crackling that felt wrong in the stillness. Help, help me, a voice whispered, fragmented and faint, like it was coming from miles away. I froze. The mall was empty, no one had come in after hours, and I'd checked every entrance. The booklet had a rule for this, if the intercom activates on its own, do not respond. Wait exactly 3 minutes before leaving the office. I stared at the clock, counting the seconds as the voice grew more desperate. Please. I'm lost, it's so dark. Something about the tone sent a chill up my spine. It wasn't fear in the voice. It was hunger. When the clock hit 1:06 a.m., the intercom cut out abruptly. I took a deep breath and opened the office door. The hallway outside was darker than it should have been. The lights buzzed overhead, but their glow seemed swallowed by the shadows. Rule number 11 stood out to me earlier, avoid the West Wing between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m. The shadows there move on their own. I told myself I wouldn't go there, but curiosity is a powerful thing. By 2:15 a.m., I was standing at the entrance to the West Wing. The air was colder here, like stepping into a freezer. The mannequins in the display windows looked different somehow, leaning slightly, their heads tilted at unnatural angles. At first, I thought the flickering lights were playing tricks on me. Then I saw it. The shadows weren't static. They rippled along the floor and walls, bending and twisting like smoke. One of them separated from the others, stretching across the tiles toward me. I backed up, but the shadow moved faster, its edges sharpening into claw-like tendrils. I turned and ran, my footsteps echoing as I darted back to the office. When I slammed the door shut, I checked the monitors. The West Wing was empty, as if nothing had happened. I was still catching my breath when I saw her. The food court camera showed a little girl standing alone, clutching a red balloon. Her back was to the camera, and she didn't move. Rule number 3 echoed in my head, do not approach. But she looked so small, so vulnerable. My instincts as a human being screamed at me to help her. But something was wrong, her silhouette didn't seem quite human. The monitors flickered, and for a split second, she turned. Her face was pale, her eyes black pits that seemed to devour the screen. The balloon drifted upward, its string twisting unnaturally in the air. Then the screen went dark. I barricaded myself in the office, clutching the booklet like it was a lifeline. The booklet had one rule that made my stomach churn, if someone knocks on the office door after 4 a.m., do not open it. No matter what they say. At 4:12 a.m., the first knock came. It was soft, almost polite. "Hey, it's me," a voice called out. It sounded like Mr. Graves. I stared at the door, my heart hammering. He wasn't supposed to be here until 6 a.m. The knocking grew louder. "Let me in, kid. There's something in the mall." I didn't move. Then the voice changed. It became deeper, raspier, filled with malice. "Open the door," it hissed. The pounding turned violent, shaking the door in its frame. A low scraping sound followed, like nails dragging across the metal. I backed away, clutching the flashlight like it was a weapon. The noise stopped suddenly, replaced by silence so profound it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. At 6 a.m., the lights brightened, and the oppressive weight lifted. When Mr. Graves arrived, he looked me over and nodded. "You followed the rules," he said. "That's good. Most don't." I shoved the booklet into his hands. "What the hell is wrong with this place?" He smiled faintly. "It's not the mall. It's what's beneath it. I quit that afternoon, but even now, I can't escape the memories. Sometimes, late at night, I hear knocking on my apartment door. And every time, I remember rule number 15. I wish I could say that leaving the job meant leaving the horrors behind. But Crescent Ridge Mall wasn't done with me. It started subtly, little things that could be chalked up to a tired mind. My bedroom door creaked open in the middle of the night, even though I was certain I'd closed it. My phone buzzed with notifications, but when I checked, there were no messages. Then the dreams began. I dreamed of the West Wing, the shadows stretching toward me. Of the girl with the red balloon, her empty sockets boring into my soul as her grin widened. In these dreams, I was always back in the security office, trapped, unable to leave. I would wake up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding as if I'd been running for my life. One night, just a week after quitting, the knocking returned. It was 4:12 a.m., the exact time it had started at the mall. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. But the sound grew louder, more insistent. "Let me in," a voice called. I froze. It was the same voice from the mall, the one that had pretended to be Mr. Graves. I didn't move, didn't breathe. My apartment was on the 4th floor. There was no hallway, no door outside my bedroom. Whatever was knocking, it wasn't standing on solid ground. The knocking turned into pounding, rattling the door in its frame. "You can't ignore me forever," it hissed. I covered my ears, trying to block it out. Eventually, the noise stopped, but the silence that followed was even worse. I felt it, something on the other side of the door, waiting. The next morning, I called Mr. Graves. I didn't even know why. I hated the man for what he'd put me through. But I needed answers. To my surprise, he picked up after the first ring. "I was wondering when you'd call," he said. "What's happening to me?" I demanded. There was a long pause before he spoke. "You left the job, but the mall doesn't let go that easily. You broke the rules when you went into the West Wing. You were marked." "Marked?" I repeated, my stomach twisting. "Some things in this world don't operate by human logic," he said. "Crescent Ridge was built over a place that doesn't belong to us. The rules were our way of keeping the balance. But when you disobeyed, you let them see you." "Who's them?" "The things beneath the mall," he replied. "The ones the rules were meant to keep at bay." His words filled me with cold dread. "How do I stop this?" "You can't," he said bluntly. "Once they've seen you, they don't forget." After the call, I noticed something strange. The booklet, the one I'd given back to Mr. Graves, was sitting on my kitchen table. I knew I hadn't brought it home. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. The rules were all the same, except for a new one written at the very end. Asterisk rule number 16, "They will come for you. When they do, don't run. Don't hide. You must return, asterisk." Return. To the mall? The thought made my skin crawl. But deep down, I knew I had no choice. That night, I drove back to Crescent Ridge Mall. It was just as I remembered, cold, silent, and oppressive. The parking lot was empty, but the automatic doors slid open as if expecting me. I stepped inside, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead. The mall was darker than it should have been, the shadows deeper, heavier. The office was untouched, the monitors still displaying the lifeless corridors. I sat in the chair, gripping the edges of the desk as the booklet's final rule echoed in my mind, *, don't run. Don't hide, *. At exactly 1:03 a.m., the intercom crackled to life. "We've been waiting," a voice whispered, low and guttural. The screens began to glitch, the cameras cycling through static and warped images. On one monitor, I saw the West Wing. The shadows were alive again, twisting and writhing, but this time, they formed shapes, faces with hollow eyes and gaping mouths. On another screen, the girl with the red balloon stood motionless in the food court. Her head twitched unnaturally, snapping toward the camera. She smiled, her mouth stretching far too wide. At 4:12 a.m., the pounding began. The office door rattled violently as the walls around me seemed to pulse, breathing in and out. The voices came from all sides now, whispering, laughing, hissing my name. Then everything stopped. The door swung open on its own. Beyond it was the West Wing, but it wasn't the mall anymore. The air was thick and humid, the darkness pressing against me like a living thing. Shapes moved in the distance, their footsteps wet and squelching. "Come," a voice beckoned, echoing from all directions. I took a step forward, and the ground beneath me felt soft, almost flesh-like. The walls pulsed, veins of glowing red light spidering through them. The girl with the balloon stood ahead of me, her figure silhouetted by a faint, unnatural glow. She pointed to a door at the end of the corridor. "This way," she whispered, her voice childlike but distorted, as if layered with something much older. I walked toward the door, every instinct screaming at me to turn back. When I reached it, I hesitated. The handle was ice cold, and a low growl rumbled from the other side. "You can't leave until you've seen," the girl said, now standing right beside me. Her empty sockets seemed to stare through me, her grin splitting her face unnaturally. I opened the door. Inside was a vast, endless void filled with shifting shadows. Figures moved within it, twisted, grotesque shapes that defied comprehension. They turned toward me as one, their hollow eyes locking onto mine. And then I understood. Crescent Ridge wasn't just a mall. It was a doorway. And I had just stepped through. I don't know how I made it out. The next thing I remember is waking up in my car, parked outside the mall. My watch read 6 a.m., but I couldn't shake the feeling that hours, days, or even years had passed. I've tried to move on, to forget what I saw. But I can't. The shadows still follow me, creeping into my dreams and spilling into my waking hours. I know one thing for certain, they're waiting. And one day, they'll call me back. Since that night, my life hasn't been the same. I've moved twice, trying to escape the lingering presence, but it follows me wherever I go. At first, it was just the dreams, the West Wing, the balloon girl, and the endless void. But soon, the waking world began to twist. Mirrors became the worst. I'd glance at my reflection and see things that shouldn't be there, faint shapes in the background, shadows moving when nothing else did. Once, I caught a glimpse of the balloon girl behind me, her grin widening as the glass cracked under her stare. I smashed that mirror, but it didn't matter. She appeared in others, always watching. The whispers started after that. They came at night, soft at first, like a distant breeze. At 4:12 a.m., without fail, they'd grow louder. "You can't hide," they'd say. "You belong to us now." I tried earplugs, music, even sleeping pills, but nothing blocked them out. They weren't just sounds, they were in my mind, crawling under my skin. The words were accompanied by faint scratching, like nails against wood, and I began waking up to deep gouges in the walls of my bedroom. I called Mr. Graves again, desperate for answers. He answered on the first ring, as if he'd been expecting me. "They're testing you," he said, his tone detached, almost bored. "They want to see how far you'll go before you break." "What do they want from me?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "To come back," he said simply. "You're their link to this world now. They won't stop until you return." The next time I looked in the mirror, I saw it, a faint, blackened mark on my chest, just above my heart. It looked like a brand, circular and jagged, like an ancient seal. It wasn't there before the mall. When I touched it, a wave of nausea washed over me, and I felt them, the shadows, the girl, the endless void. they were tethered to me through this mark. I tried scrubbing it away, but it only grew darker. Sometimes, it pulsed faintly, as if alive. I knew what it meant. The mall wasn't just a place. It was alive, sentient, and it had claimed me. The final straw came 3 weeks after my return. I was lying in bed, clutching a flashlight like it would save me, when the knocking began again. This time, it wasn't at my door. It was inside the walls. Slow, deliberate thuds echoed through the plaster, moving closer with every knock. The whispers followed, growing louder, overlapping until they became an unbearable cacophony. Come back. Come back. Come back. The walls bulged, the shadows stretching and writhing, forming twisted shapes with clawed hands and empty faces. The mark on my chest burned like fire. And then I heard her. "Don't make me come get you," the girl with the balloon whispered, her voice impossibly close. The pressure became unbearable, and I knew I couldn't take it anymore. I don't remember driving to Crescent Ridge Mall. One moment, I was in my apartment, and the next, I was standing in the empty parking lot. The mall loomed before me, its glass doors glowing faintly under the flickering streetlights. The doors slid open as I approached, and the air inside was colder than ever. The shadows seemed thicker, more alive. This time, the office wasn't my destination. The West Wing called to me, the faint sound of laughter and the squeak of a balloon string pulling me deeper into the mall. As I stepped into the West Wing, the ground shifted beneath me. The tiles gave way to something softer, pulsating faintly underfoot. The mannequins in the displays turned their heads toward me, their glass eyes following my every move. At the end of the corridor stood the girl, her balloon hovering unnaturally. She raised her hand, pointing to a door that hadn't been there before. "You're late," she said, her voice a mix of a child's innocence and something ancient and cruel. I reached the door, my hand trembling as I grasped the cold, rusted handle. The mark on my chest throbbed violently, like it was trying to drag me forward. When I opened it, the void was waiting. The shadows surged toward me, wrapping around my limbs and pulling me in. The air was thick, suffocating, and the whispers grew deafening. "You're ours now," they said in unison. I screamed, but no sound came out. The darkness consumed me, dragging me into a world that wasn't meant for humans. The last thing I saw was the girl's face, her grin stretching impossibly wide as she whispered, "Welcome home." No one has heard from me since that night. But if you're reading this, take my advice, never work the night shift at Crescent Ridge Mall. And if you hear a knock at your door at 4:12 a.m., don't answer it. No matter what. The darkness swallowed me whole, and for a time, there was nothing, no sound, no light, just the crushing weight of the void. I don't know how long I drifted in that emptiness, but eventually, I became aware of a presence. It wasn't just one thing, it was countless. Voices layered over one another, emotions crashing together in chaos. Fear, hunger, anger, all directed at me. "You broke the rules," the voices said. I didn't know. I shouted, my voice echoing in the abyss. "Once you enter, you are bound. You saw too much. You belong to us now," they replied. Desperation took over. "There has to be a way out," I pleaded. The voices paused, and then, as if reaching a silent agreement, they spoke again. "A trade." "What kind of trade?" I asked, dreading the answer. "Bring us another. Someone willing to break the rules as you did. Someone curious, reckless. Only then will we release you." When I opened my eyes, I was standing outside Crescent Ridge Mall, the parking lot bathed in the dim light of dawn. My chest ached, and when I looked down, I saw the mark had grown darker, more intricate. I was free, but not completely. The bargain hung over me like a guillotine. For weeks, I wrestled with the decision. Could I really lure someone else into the nightmare I'd escaped? Could I live with myself knowing what I'd done? The shadows didn't give me a choice. They were always there, at the edge of my vision, in the corners of my room, whispering their reminders. If I didn't act, they promised to drag me back. I returned to the mall under the guise of visiting Mr. Graves. To my surprise, he was still there, as though nothing had changed. "You're back," he said, his face unreadable. "I need a replacement," I said bluntly. He didn't flinch. Instead, he handed me a new copy of the rule book. They always come back, he muttered. I found my target soon enough, a young man desperate for work. He reminded me of myself when I first started, eager, naive, and clueless about the horrors lurking beneath the surface. I told him about the job, downplayed the rules, and made it sound like a simple gig. He took the bait without hesitation. The last time I saw him, he was sitting in the security office, flipping through the rulebook with a puzzled expression. As I walked away, I felt the mark on my chest burn, and I knew the shadows were satisfied, for now. I haven't heard from him since. I've moved far away from Crescent Ridge Mall, but the shadows still haunt my dreams. They're quieter now, less insistent, but I know they're always watching. I write this not to absolve myself, but to warn you. If you ever see a job posting for night security at Crescent Ridge Mall, don't apply. No matter how desperate you are, no matter how enticing the offer seems. The mall doesn't just take employees, it takes souls. And if you hear a knock at your door at 4:12 a.m., no matter how much it sounds like someone you know, do not answer. Because once they see you, they never forget.